So electric vehicles, definitely something all of you are extremely curious about, not just the vehicles themselves, but everything that is happening around this space. It is a new ecosystem. That is what we are looking forward to as consumers. Certainly those of us who are in the middle of it in terms of tracking all of it are equally excited on that front. Anand Kulkarni is the product line director for electric vehicle and ALFA architecture at the passenger vehicle business unit in Tata Motors. And Sandeep Bangia is the head for EV, HA and ESCO business at Tata Power. Also, two gentlemen totally in the thick of things when it comes to this EV space. And like I said, everything that's happening around it. So let me go ahead and welcome them. Good afternoon and thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon, Siddharth.
Thank you, Siddharth, for having us on the show. Thank you.
No, it's wonderful for you to be able to spend some time with me today, and especially because, like I mentioned, the topic that we have at hand is something around which now there is more than just curiosity. It is, and with good reason, because unlike the run up to this 2018, 2019, when there was a lot of lip service, a lot of conversation, but no real hard action on ground. Now we are seeing that there is finally a lot of movement. So the basic question that everybody has, of course, is how soon? The good news now is that it's not about if or when, it's all happening. So I'll come to you first, Anand. We've seen that with the EVs themselves, there has been a huge stretch of time where we talked a lot about product, but it was always out of reach. We always talked about what was happening in Western markets. After that came a wave of talking about vehicles that were extremely premium, out of reach. And then finally, in the last 18 to 20 months, the conversation has shifted to more credible, more affordable, more real-world products for a mass consumer. Is that a change that you are particularly excited to see?
Siddharth, you picked up the right points, and it's wonderful because there have been so many things falling into place at the right time. For example, battery prices have been coming down. And then there are expectations about range. And in a country like India, where most of us don't drive more than, say, 50 odd kilometers a day, you probably need about 200 kilometers, 200 plus kilometers of range to be really able to commute well. And then you have all these factors come together, and suddenly the cars have become more accessible. We also notice and see that people are willing to pay a slight premium on what they drive as ICE cars. And because of the increasing cost of emission treatments on ICE vehicles and the falling battery prices, both of them have sort of worked together to make these cars extremely accessible. And that's where the Nexon hit the right spot at the right time. And then you see all of a sudden the interest is so high, and the uptake, the acceptance and the adoption rates are significantly higher.
The Nexon is a great example, and not just because you're from Tata that I say this, and not just also because it was a significant award winner at the Carandbike Awards. To us at the jury at the awards, and then of course all of us editorially in the team also, you're right about hitting that sweet spot. So Sandeep, to you next. Of course, the whole idea of when the consumer starts to look at this more credibly, obviously the reason why you are in this business space, but the fact that you're seeing this kind of a credible proof of vehicle concept coming to market now has also got to be encouraging.
Yeah, I think for Tata Power, which is about 100-year-old power utility, which is there in the business of generation, transmission, and distribution, I think electric vehicle charging was the next logical step to get into. So when there was this discussion about the entire electrical mobility in the country, I think we stepped out and put up our first charging station about 2 years back. And that is also the time at which Tata Tigor and the other vehicles which were coming in. So this is the time that we are now seeing active interest from OEMs, so car manufacturers, to say, guys, what are you up to? How much are you putting up? And we are seeing active collaboration, and we are landing up talking to customers like this. There is a whole narrative around this EV ecosystem, and which is really, answering the chicken and egg situation, as we always like to put it. So we would like to believe that we are trying to be ahead of the curve when the charging infrastructure, as far as charging infrastructure is concerned. Though Anand is never happy, but yeah, we are trying to please him.
Well, I mean, you'll get any number of critics, especially when it comes to this space, I think. But the context, set that context for us. I'm going to stay with you on this. You mentioned about how at the company you were sort of taking a look at what's happening in this landscape, and you took certain business decisions. But initially, let's go back a few years to when you first actively took those decisions to enter the space. Was it a difficult decision considering the lack of movement or the slow pace that we were seeing here in India?
So good. I think that's a very interesting one. It was not really difficult for two reasons really. So number one, I think we were seeing the rest of the world moving towards electric mobility, and we knew that this space is something which is meant for experts, not just for somebody who can just install a charger, because putting up a charging infrastructure is actually not about infrastructure, it's about the customer. This is point number one. And secondly, I think we were seeing very clearly the benefits which were accruing to the end customer. People were not buying electric cars just because they are hip and fancy and no pollution. They are really good. They are value for money. They are good vehicles to drive. So those are the kind of things that we were seeing. And even today, if there is a fleet vehicle, let us say a Tata Tigor or any other vehicle which is going in the fleet segment, he finds it more remunerative to opt for an electric car versus a petrol diesel car. Similarly, buses, even today, the buses find it very, very easy to sort of consolidate their entire cost structure within electric mobility. So I think spanning from two-wheeler to fleets to cars like Nexon, and then right up to the buses, we were spanning out. And so it was not really difficult. But yeah, we had our own learning curve. How did we go about? And that's where I always say this. It's not just Tata Power is learning about electric mobility. It is the entire country is learning about electric mobility. The entire world is learning about electric mobility, and that's where we learn from each other. We follow global practices and stuff like that. And we think we are doing okay.
No, and I have to say, this whole learning curve, that's the part that's exciting for all of us as well. So you're absolutely right on how that space continues to keep things very interesting. What's also nice is technology keeps us really interested. There's always some new innovation around the corner before you know it. Speaking of which, Anand, you mentioned about how the Nexon hit the sweet spot. Now, two questions that come straight from that. Key learnings from this as a business, so that obviously everybody now wants the next well-priced, affordable, credible EV from your stable. There are a lot of speculative stories that we all keep doing about which one that is going to be. But that notwithstanding, I think the fact that you're baking in EV capability into all these new platforms in any case is encouraging. From your perspective, so therefore, the key learnings from the Nexon EV project itself, and where you think you can still take it. I mean, it's still a new project in that sense, still early days.
Yeah. So that's interesting because the Nexon was, when we started off, we started off with a hope, we started off with a vision, we started off with a aspiration to sort of enter that space Sandeep has spoken about it, you've spoken about it. We wanted to get into that right space at the right time. And to be honest with you, a whole lot of choices had to be made. Choices had to be made at a time when you did not have prior references. In a lot of cases, when we work in the automotive area, there is always a reference available in the background. And then you try and decide whether that trend is going to work forwards, or that it's going to be an incremental trend, or there is going to be some disruption in some area, etc. To do the Nexon, or to do an electrification of the Nexon, there was no prior reference available. And therefore, there had to be choices. Now, when we made those choices, it was always a situation about how would those choices pan out. And there were choices to be made in terms of power. There were choices to be made in terms of, for example, what kind of range would you give? And we sort of kept ourselves constrained by the fact that if people are going to drive about 200 kilometers on a single charge, then how do we achieve that, and how do we also maintain the platform balance? Because and I've said this multiple times, it's not about whether you can put more battery or not. It is about whether people find it affordable and whether people can put it to good use or not. And therefore, some of these choices in terms of what range, what power, we thought about it in a certain way, and it's come good. Now, after the product has been introduced, there is a lot of rich feedback that is coming to us. And in most cases, our calls have been vindicated because people said, oh, this is perfect. This is what I like for my daily commute. And also it helps me do my weekly commutes or a vacation commute. And of course, I like to pull Sandeep on this, but Sandeep puts up enough chargers around the cities, then which he is, by the way. It is enabling a lot of people to take journeys of 300, 400, 500 kilometers. And I mean, Siddharth, if I were to tell you, there are customers today. There's a customer who lives in Satara and he works in Thana. And you know him, Sandeep, right? This guy, on every week, he makes this trip from Satara to Thana with a charge in between at Wakad, which is on the outskirts of Pune. And there are people who do Sangli, Pune. There are people who do Chandigarh, Delhi. There are people who do Bangalore, Mangalore. And you find that it's suddenly opened up a lot of things. Going forward, how would we do it? I think this rich feedback has enabled us to understand that there are a couple of additional things that people would like, perhaps, in terms of how the region can work, what kind of specifications would need to be provided. And there is also a certain class of people who would also appreciate additional range. 80% of the people are satisfied with the range that we have. But if this were to be the only car in the family, then maybe we need to provide people with additional range capabilities. And these are kind of things that we would look at.
Well, like I said, presumably some of your future products, I know the Altros, there's a lot of buzz around that, will answer some of those questions. But Sandeep, fitting the car of this nature into your lifestyle, there was always such a lot of doubt around it. Now we find that people have finally understood that the car is still a car. It's still going to serve the same purpose. It's just about changing your mindset. It actually fits into your lifestyle quite easily. Tell us, with your experience now, as well as the research that you have at hand, that's India specific and not Western research.
Yeah, of course.
Is it true that most people's apprehension when it comes to charging infrastructure is unfounded, in the sense that they can actually do this very practically? They don't really need to have a million charging points at their disposal. It can be done practically and without having that apprehension.
Okay, I think that's a $1 million question. I think we'll end up doing this education for customers all the time. Yeah. So two things specifically. See, number one, I think you mentioned about the word mindset, and I think that's where the entire game starts and ends. See, we are used to, ever since birth, about €100 mindset of going to a petrol pump, fueling up, and then coming back. And it just takes you a jiffy to do that. We're just trying to change that mindset to say that, look, the car is where it is supposed to be. It is at my home. So I'm in my office or wherever it is parked. Wherever it is parked and wherever it is standing, you just put in a charger there and you don't need to do anything different. So I think that's exactly the mindset we are trying to change. And I call this centralized refueling versus fragmented refueling. So today, if I were to just say that I'm at my house, there is a car in my parking lot, it is getting charged. I go to my office, there is a charger at office. I go to the mall, there is a charger at the mall. I decide to go to Ahmedabad, there is a charger at Borivali, there is a charger at Surat, there is a charger at Baroda. So if I were to spend half an hour, eating a dosa or a coffee at Surat, it'll take me half an hour, and by that time the car is full with the charger of the fast rapid charger variety. So really speaking, of course there are some gaps. I don't deny that, but that's where I think people like us are working with people like Anand, OEMs. So we have tie-ups with other OEMs as well, and we take learnings from them as to what is it that their customers are. Where is Anand's customer? So he was referring to this particular customer of Satara. Uh, there are times that we ask a customer that, Chief, uh, would you allow us to, or would you hold our hand and take us to your admin guy so that we can install a charger at your office? It will help you, and it will help the cause of the other customers, potential customers of the EV ecosystem. So those are the kind of things that we're doing. So two or three things. One is the awareness is what we are trying to focus on very, very strongly. And for that awareness, we are doing a lot of things like we put up a charger in let us say Chembur. So we just make a good social media post about it and just tom the fact that there's a lot of cars coming to Chembur for charging and all of that. Now, this itself makes the people around that area think that now there is a charger, I can consider electric car. I don't know whether you're familiar. You are a global citizen, Siddharth. You must be familiar with a study that was done by Nissan Leaf in Europe to say that if there is a charger in the vicinity, people around that start buying electric cars. It is just a mindset that but the fact is they may not actually land up using it because they have a home charger.
Yeah.
They have a charger, they have a private petrol pump at home. They may not land up using it, but it's the mindset. And that's what we are trying to change, and it's happening.
You've actually brought me to the topic exactly that I wanted to get to when it comes to busting some of the myths. Because, when even those of us in the media, when we talk about, EVs and the myths around them, we start going down the very cliched sort of a route without realizing that the actual consumer cares about a few other things, not some of these big headlines like just range anxiety. And that, what you just said, is going to be exactly what I want to follow up with both of you. Now, a lot of times people talk so much about, I can't buy such a car or I can't make this switch simply because, infrastructure doesn't exist. You also have automobile players saying the same thing, that, we'd love to launch so many of our models, but we can't do it because infrastructure hasn't yet caught up. But that point, that majority of your usage in your car usage life involves your daily commute. It doesn't really involve intercity transport. That happens once in a while. Given that, having the charger at your home or office, 90% of the time that's enough, right, Sandeep?
Absolutely. So, if I can just take this one, I think we are following the global pattern there, really. In India, I think Anand will be able to talk more about for specific Nexon example. We are very clearly finding that the public charging is there for a minimal. Most customers who are staying in the city don't land up going to a public charger. They do it at home. We do it for home charging for Nexon, and we do it for some other brands as well. Most cases, customers actually have never ever gone to a public charger. And this is something that an EV owner will tell you. A person who has not yet taken the jump will feel apprehensive about it. But now that this education is trickling in, people do realize I may never need to go to a public. They just need to go to a public charger for emergency. That is, if I forget charging one of these days, and for intercity. That's it. You really otherwise don't need to go for public charger. I'm saying things which doesn't suit me, honestly, but that's how it is.
And I sort of agree with what Sandeep is saying. I mean, we plot and we track a lot of our customers because we have this Z-Connect app, the telematics, and we look at data. And an overwhelming majority are home charging on 95, 90. So on an overall statistic, more than 97% of the times people are charging at home. And there can always be different pockets. So when you have people who are driving more and therefore individually using a disproportionately high percentage of fast chargers, they are always doing it on a fixed route day in and day out. So it is very difficult for you to get people who are doing random segments of drives and yet doing extremely high mileage on a daily basis. It just doesn't happen. So when you look at these two things, what happens is most of the cases you have people charge at home and it satisfies their condition. And then when you look at the small minuscule percentile of people who are moving around high mileage but on a fixed route, that's where we give input to Sandeep, and he goes across and immediately gets a fast charger installed, and that's how we sort of plug that particular route, and it enables all our customers to therefore take full access, full benefit to this kind of stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense. And when it comes to those kind of gaps, again, how do you base the decision? Is it volume based? Is it time centric? Is it location based, Sandeep? When it comes to deciding what kind of charger you need to install, because you don't have to put a fast charger everywhere, obviously.
Yeah, so you're right. So I think it depends on the likelihood of a car spending time there. So if I were to put up go to a mall to install a charger, I would typically not go for a very fancy 50 kilowatt charger. It is not required. I would be putting 50 kilowatt chargers, 25 kilowatt chargers along the highways. But for malls, 7.5 kilowatt charger is good enough, because all you are requiring to do is topping it up. You're not requiring to fill up the entire tank, so to speak. You're just requiring top up. That's it.
Opportunity charges, as
opportunity charging, as I call it, opportunity charging. That's right. So
I like that. I like that term. I'm going to use it. I'm going to borrow it now and use it very, very frequently, because this is also, I think, a good understanding that the guys. There's lots of people now that we keep hearing about startups getting into the space. People like Sunfuel, etc., who are also getting into this space. I think there's a good understanding of what is the actual usage required versus simply having some sort of great plan on paper to go out and have this network of chargers. Speaking now a little bit about what responsibility the OEM community has here, because of course it's early days. As you mentioned, you work with Tata for Nexon customers, certain other brands. We have seen an impetus thanks to the likes of the Hyundai Kona or the ZS EV, because at least the electric vehicle has moved out of the luxury premium space. But having said that, how much of an onus of this still has to lie on the OE space, do you think? Anand, I'll go to you first on that.
So you are asking this question in terms of the onus in perspective of the specifications of the entire system, Siddharth?
Yeah. No, see, I'll tell you. The onus in the sense of course, educating the consumer, we already know is something that you are doing. But in terms of also getting them on board with this aspect of how the charging has to actually be handled in that sense. You mentioned that you handhold them and you of course help them with the infrastructure at the start, but to also then make sure that there's an app, and you make sure that even to convince them in the first place, you can demonstrate how easy it is to, because a lot of people who live in apartments think, oh, my parking is in the basement, there's no way I can wire a separate meter reading there, how will I get charged for this electricity, I'll get charged too much, somebody will steal it. So those kind of apprehensions, how do you get past those?
Yeah, so what we do, and I think we will also ask Sandeep to elaborate on that. But when any customer for Nexon EV, or for that matter the Tigor EV approaches us, he is given a home charging included within the entire offering of the car. And point of time, of course, Sandeep and his team go around to make sure that they do audit of each of those sites, and then they look at everything and make sure that everything works just fine for so far as the customer is concerned. And then they also go ahead and install the box on our behalf, because there is a whole set of requirements in terms of what earthing should be there, how should the connection be placed, what distance, etc., etc. So that's one part of it. From our perspective, one is we provide this app on which the customer gets to know how much charge he has and what the charging time is going to be required in case he wants to go and access the charge. But also there is a lot of customer perceptions about it. Example, we were really surprised to note some of these customers came back to us and said, "Oh, you know what? I have a problem. I can't charge my car fully." And we said, "But why?" And they said, "I have been told that if I charge my car fully, it will have a problem." And what kind of a problem? No, it's not good for the battery. So I'm not charging my car fully. Yeah. So what are you doing? And they said, "Oh, well, we stop our charging at 90%, and we try and plug it back again at 70%. So you see, the entire battery capacity is just not getting utilized properly, and these are misconceptions that exist because people try and relate to something else. People these days people read a lot, and they may sort of try and connect the dots. So this is one of the things that we have to constantly work with. And when we explained all these aspects to people about how to charge it, what do you do? There are a lot of questions. What do I do if I go away for 15 days? How do I leave my car charged? Do I leave my car half charged? Does somebody need to come and plug in? All of these awareness related issues have to be managed. We also have an app that sort of helps people identify the nearest location of the charger. And then there is an app that Sandeep can probably speak about a little in a little more details, where the Tata Power app shows whether that particular charging location is occupied or it's available, and how long are you going to take in order to charge it back. So this is what we think are pieces of information, very useful information around the most important point of electric vehicle usage, which is the range anxiety. The moment you allay these fears, I think the adoption becomes that much easier, and people start to get used to it. I always give the example of smartphones. When we had feature phones available, the phone would last, the juice would last for about 5. And then the smartphones came, and all of a sudden we realized that they don't last for more than 24 hours. But then we got used to it now. Yeah. It's all about just getting used to these kind of things. We have to keep telling people, we have to keep helping people out, and that's what we're trying.
That was an interesting point you just made. So now that you've got my attention on that, I might as well ask you this before I talk about the app with Sandeep. Anand, going away for 15 days, what are you supposed to do?
Well, so if you go away for 15 days, we recommend that you shut down the vehicle properly so that there is no residual current. You can charge the vehicle 100% and leave it there, just like that. Just if you're going away for 15 days, don't plug the charger in and leave it there. Yeah. That's all that we say. Yeah? Apart from that, there's nothing more. I mean, we wouldn't say that you disconnect the batteries, the auxiliary batteries, etc. 15 days is not a problem.
All right, good to know. And that's a nice little nugget that we've given some of our viewers right now. All right, so we were talking about this app and how you can find where in the network you can find the closest charger, etc. But realistically speaking, then Sandeep, as I mentioned, 5 years back, the conversation was always about, the government has to roll out this huge infrastructure. We need this massive pan-India network in our kind of chaotic traffic that's never going to happen. All that now people have accepted is not necessary. What is the sort of optimal, or at least a threshold, sort of a number or distribution of public charging that you feel is required around at least the major hubs like the big metros?
Well, so as I mentioned, I think we are trying to keep up with the growth of vehicles. The big thing here is that on an ideal situation, we would like to put our chargers at any place where the car stops for more than a few hours. Example, offices like commercial complexes, there is an office building. If we approach those people, so home and office covers 97%, as Anand was mentioning here. Then there are malls, shopping complexes, coffee shops. Now, those are the kind of places where the car stops for an hour, 2 hour, 3 hour, and all of that. Now, those are the places that we would ideally like to cover. Where right now, trying to spread ourselves slightly more widely distributed, so that at least there is one charger in the vicinity of, let's say 4 to 5 kilometers of any location that you would spot. And we do have. So let's say we are sitting in Mumbai, we have close to about 65 chargers, public chargers, not including home chargers, not including captive chargers. For example, if there is a charger in my society, it's not a public charger, but it is accessible to me as a common community charger. So 60 odd chargers are available for use of the public, for people who are traveling in and out, which is really speaking not a lot, but currently you will find a charger in Mumbai, even in Pune for that matter, where Anand is, at a distance of about 3 to 4 kilometers, which is sufficient currently. But with the increasing density of vehicles, we might as well put one charger just next to the same parking bay. It has to be realized that a charger increases the footfall for the establishment that it is established. And that's exactly what we are doing, and we're just trying to make a difference there.
So if I were to...
Go ahead, Anand.
If Sandeep said, in the initial phase of development of market, or in the initial phase of when there is going to be a higher adoption, or we are just looking at adoption of electric vehicles starting to rise, we will need to distribute ourselves at multiple locations. And so you need to have locations, and as the density increases, as the penetration increases, then you will have to look at number of chargers at each location also. So there is location, there is one part is the location, and then the second part is how many charge points you have per location. Because that is where we are looking at data to see the frequency of usage of that particular charger, so that you don't want anybody coming to that location and returning either because some other car was charging or for some other reason it was not available. And this is also going to be an interesting area for us to look at in the future as penetrations increase. What Sandeep said is absolutely right. I mean, the presence of a charger motivates somebody to go electric. And therefore, the visibility is in the initial days is going to be absolutely important.
This point that you made about somebody having to go to a place, see some other car charging, then maybe return. What sort of feedback? I know that's probably not empirical data, but in a city like Pune, for example, where there are now more adopters, certainly in NCR, what sort of feedback are you getting from those customers? I mean, is that becoming more of a problem now, or people are just like, oh, you know what, I'll not do it right now, I'll do it some other time, or I'll just go home, I'll be able to get home?
So at least
sorry.
From what we hear from our customer support teams, and maybe then you can add to that.
Yeah.
From what we hear as direct feedback from our customers, so far this particular aspect is not happening. There have been sporadic cases, let's be very honest about it, but they have been very few and rare in that sense. But you are right, as the density of cars increases, as the number of cars increases, this is an aspect that will become Sandeep's problem very soon.
Sandeep, you want to add to that?
Oh, yes. I think this is where we come into the picture. Clear. We have I always keep saying, that this entire thing is about the customer, not so much about the infrastructure. So what we have done here is we have put together a digital platform, which is an absolutely cutting-edge digital platform. To the customer, it looks like a mobile application. In that application, he can see the charger. He can decide which charger he wants to go to and then navigate to that charger. He will know from where he is that one charger, which is, let's say, 40 kilometers away, is currently occupied. But since I'm going to take about 45 minutes to reach there, can I block space for me? I can book a charger spot so that when I reach there, the charger spot is empty. It cannot give to anybody else because I've already charged for it in terms of money. And so identify the charger, navigate to the charger, block the charger, pay for it using your app itself, and then the entire ecosystem works for the customer. even before he can begin his journey. So take an example, I go to Mahabaleshwar very often. I don't want to wait for somebody to finish his charging before I go. So I can just map it and say, I leave from here, charge my car at Lonavala, I block that 30 minutes there. I block that 30 minutes in Wakat. I block maybe another 10-15 minutes there. Though incidentally, most cars will reach Lonavala without a charge, without a top-up, honestly.
Yeah.
But the anxiety still is there. And that's where our digital platform comes into play. And this is an award-winning digital platform. We got a Gold Innovation Award for this platform. And we are trying to take it to the world, not just for our customers here.
But, this aspect of having to sort of book a slot so that you can save time, and India being the way it is and the kind of traffic that we have, what's the kind of margin or leeway you would play with in terms of somebody being sort of that much late or delayed in arriving at that particular spot?
So those are the kind of things that we are also watching very closely.
Yeah.
In most cases, Google gives you a good indication of the traffic time it will take. And then the customer is smart enough to just do a 15 to 20 minute before and after. And that's the kind of margin that so he is playing with it. But I guess these are the things that we are learning. We haven't got any constraints or issues as yet, because, really speaking today, that feature is hardly ever actually used. Because that I'm the electric car owner, I have a badge of green. So I'm really welcome everywhere I go. All he needs to know is where is the charger. He may not even know that there is a facility of booking. When he finds a problem, then is the time that he will know, I have to supposed to book, and maybe that's. As of now, I don't think there is a challenge that we are facing at all.
Yeah, it's still early days in terms of the actual number of cars that are on the road. But, a few aspects now that I'd like to get both of your views on. The first is about how this is now starting to catch on. There is obviously a certain role to still be played by, all the various stakeholders, including media, by the way, in terms of, taking some of this messaging across, which is what we are doing. But when you have a lot of news that sometimes tends to distract, if you will, the fact that Tesla is coming to India, does a brand like that necessarily play a role like, say, the iPhone played for the smartphone revolution? Or is too much being attached to all of this? Because you also have a real-world revolution that's already started with cars like the Nexon. I'd like to get this from both of you. So, Sandeep, maybe to you first.
Okay, I say this as a marketeer standpoint. I think most of the consumer adoption for a new category of products almost always begins at the top.
Mm-hmm.
Almost always. You take mobile phone, the richest people had mobile phones first, and then it trickled down. You take the motor car had, the richest people bought it first, and then it trickles down. So this is the first part. The second part very clearly is that the people who are in that space make way for others to follow. They are the people who are the influencers. So let us say today, a Nexon user, or for that matter, even a Mercedes MQC or any other brands that big, they are the people who are the movers and shakers of the setup. And they are the early adopters or innovators, should I call it, in the marketing hierarchy. And they are the people who actually make a good amount of talking points about it. And they influence the rest of the people to really follow. A Tesla or the Apple of the world just makes you believe as a customer or a potential customer that, look, this is fantastic to adopt. So when the prices come down, I will like to be an Apple. I think, so this is purely from a marketing standpoint, not necessarily from a car standpoint. And this is exactly what is happening to the Indian car ecosystem. What you are seeing here, we've got cars at the super premium segment, which are electric. Now, there are cars like MG and Kona and Nexon at that spectrum. Even today, that car price point is slightly on the higher side because the larger numbers are sitting on the lower end of the spectrum. But these are the people who are the really influencers, and they are the people who create the narrative. And that's I wouldn't be worried. It is just a question of time that the inflection point will be that people will be adopting this EV ecosystem entirely before we really move on.
Anand?
I sort of echo what Sandeep has said, because a product like a high-end product in any segment sort of creates a certain degree of awareness. It is a big entry, and it just indicates that there's a lot of interest in that space. And like you would have with any product, there's a lot of understanding. There's a lot of excitement about it. But then when people come to choose products which they would use on a regular basis, that's where the reality of how they're going to use it and how it's going to help them meet their use case requirements will kick in. And then you see the rationality of TCO, or the rationality of how much does it cost, how much does it take to charge, etc., etc. All of these things start figuring out. So very important that a technology kind of awareness is made by the super premium cars, and then you have a lot of discussions around the real cars that get used. So I think in a way it's going to be very helpful. It's excellent that Tesla is coming to India. There's such a huge amount of excitement about it. It's going to help the overall adoption of electric vehicles. There's no doubt about it.
All right. Now, when it comes to the infrastructure, one of the other things that a lot of people have questions around is the uniformity, or making sure that there is a certain universality to it. Sandeep, when it comes to the likes of, say, a Tesla, on the one hand, a lot of talk about the Tesla Supercharger, it becomes a very niche example. But when it comes to the other players that you mentioned, whether it's a Mercedes EQC, whether it's a Kona, whether it's a ZS EV, or indeed the Nexon. That's just today what we have that we're talking about. But, we're seeing now the I-Pace has come in, the Audi e-tron is coming. And then, of course, there's all this talk about other mass vehicle offerings from the likes of Hyundai, Kia, Tata bringing more models. How important is it that, players like yourself increasingly do these tie-ups, so that everything that the consumer sees, regardless of the vehicle that they adopt, is the same sort of plug and play, easy to use, easy to understand. It's like how when you switch from Apple to Android, people get all sort of anxiety. That shouldn't happen in the auto space.
Yeah. So I make it slightly easy to communicate this way. So charging is all about three C's, right? So number one is consistency. When I say consistency, it's the consistency of the plug. So your connector. So you've got a CCS connector, you've got a DC001 connector, you've got a SHAdeMO connector. We would like to see a common connector, which is the way the mobile phone ecosystem has evolved. So they've just moved to a single connector, and that's what we think that it's already moving in that direction. Consistency in the policy framework. Maharashtra policy is very different from Delhi electric vehicle policy, is very different from Andhra policy. All are fantastic, but they could do with some good amount of consistency. So this is the first part, consistent. The second part is collaboration, the second C. And that collaboration in the ecosystem is so critical to my mind. To my mind, that is the biggest one. Collaboration with the charge point operators for the OEMs, Tata Motors, the other brands. So we get fed all this information and we feed this information back to them so that they learn, we learn, and the ecosystem grows. The collaboration from government agencies, collaboration from municipal authorities. Was if I want to put up a charger next to a parking slot in a railway station, there is the red tape that comes in big time. We really want that space for charging. It's a utility. But, so those kind of things are there. Collaboration with the real estate owners, which includes the government in that sense. Collaboration with the media, I would say. Collaboration with the Residents Welfare Association. So if the society is wanting to collaborate, I think Those are the kind of collaboration that we are talking about of the entire ecosystem. And the third piece is the customer. I think in all of these things, customer experience is something that should not suffer. Which is where things which are the digital platform that we are investing in. So we are seeing globally, we are learning from them. You go to a place for charging, you have to be sure that this charger is always going to work. This charger is always going to dispense charge, and you can pay through whatever mechanism through your mobile phone, and it has to happen time and again, without fail. I mean, this is the entire customer experience we are talking about. Whether it comes from consistency, whether it comes from collaboration, it has to lead to a very high quality customer experience. And infrastructure is something that is relatively simple, honestly.
All right. So final comments then. We talked about how majority of usage happens in patterns where you really don't need to be apprehensive about charging. Yeah, most of it is taken care of at the home or at the office. For those who do require a top up or have an emergency requirement due to traffic or whatever other reason, forgetfulness, you have citywide infrastructure. And then, of course, those who want to go long distance now, increasingly, there is highway infrastructure. So these three areas are pretty well understood. So I would like to get from both of you. I would also like to tell our viewers that it's one thing to talk about how both of them today are, very much in the middle of all this action, but just imagine how much work they would have put in to get to this point. Therefore, their understanding of this topic is something that I find exciting. Speaking of which, to both of you then, Anand, what level of excitement do you feel seeing all of this unfold? Because on the one hand, of course, you continue to be part of a company where the passenger vehicle business unit produces some very exciting cars, the ICE vehicles that are coming out. They're award-winning as well. They're beautiful to look at, and they're certainly creating a lot of buzz. But at the same time, there's this quiet storm that's building up with EVs. How excited are you?
It is fantastic, Siddharth, and I can tell you the last 3 years have been the most exciting phase because of a huge learning curve. And I constantly say that we have to look at electric vehicles without the lens of an ICE vehicle, and that's going to be the true adoption criteria for not only for us as vehicle manufacturers, but also to a larger stakeholder community about how we are going to establish electric vehicles. And I want to also tell you that the last 2 years particularly have been exciting in terms of growth as well. Last year we sold about as a market, we sold 6,600 EVs. Now this is almost a 200% plus increase over what we had sold in the previous year. And this year already, despite the lockdowns, etc., we are going at, we as in Tata Motors are definitely going at around 600 cars a month, which already is signifying a significant increase over what we did last year. And we think that we've reached a point where it is not only early adopters, but also mainstream people who are coming and saying, hey, can this be my regular car? And I'm willing to accept a certain level of adaptation around an electric vehicle because it helps me. And in a way, the lockdown and the clean air that we had because of less vehicular pollution has also made people aware of the benefits of all these things. And therefore, it's going to be a great journey from here on. And we're all looking forward to this. And I think EVs are here to stay. EVs are going to grow at a phenomenal rate. Of course, it's a nascent market still. So growth rates are going to be fantastic. And as more choices become available to people, the uptick will be significant.
I certainly hope it happens even sooner than what all of us sitting here are expecting. In fact, to sort of go with that Tata example, I'll say something that might sound a little naive to some people, but I'll say it anyway. It will be nice to be able to pull up, say, in a Nexon EV at a Starbucks outlet, get a coffee while the car charges, and just go around through your day without a care in the world. I think luckily we are being able to talk about that in a realistic sense now. It's not looking like some long distant dream. So it is exciting. It is encouraging. more power to both of you, no pun intended, or perhaps pun intended. And, we certainly look for all the innovation that's coming from you on the technology as well as product front from both of you. So do keep us plugged into all of that as well. And thank you for your time today.